Hi guys, thank you very much for watching this video. We're going to watch the video. We're going to do today's lesson as a video because it's going to help us speed up some content. It's also going to make it easier for you to do some of this work at home, okay? So let's quickly go into what could take a very long time. Today we're going to look at what we call the cosmological argument. All the resources that you need are up on Google Drive. Let me show you. Quickly go to Google Classrooms, have a look at irrelevant philosophy, and we've got everything we need right here, and of course I'll have this video up. Alright, so just make sure that you understand that everything I'm using today is up here under the heading, the cosmological argument, okay? So let's look at what we're going to try and achieve throughout this video. By the end of this video, we want to be able to articulate the 5 sub-arguments that serve as a cosmological proof for St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas was a very well-known Catholic philosopher, extremely well-known, and he is known for developing a proof of God that uses cosmology. Now, these days, when we talk about cosmology, we're really talking about a branch of physics that's used to describe or explain how the universe was created and how it evolved. But back at his time, cosmology would be more like a philosophy that explains how God created the universe. And if you understand that cosmology means something a bit different back in St. Thomas's time, then you basically understand why we call this the cosmological argument, especially when we look at the 5 ways. So what are our success criteria? Well, our success criteria are, number 1, we're going to name, define, and interrelate key terms. We always do that. Those key terms come together to form premises, and those premises then come together to form conclusions, be they based on inductive or deductive logic. You'll probably find that a lot of St. Thomas's logic is inductive, and I think you'll see why. Except for one argument. One argument is incredibly deductive, and it is the possibility to actuality. I think that's the argument. Anyway, we'll look at it later. And then we're going to be able to evaluate the logic. So then we want to be able to articulate the logic of the 5 ways. We want to be able to explain the logic of the 5 ways, and you'll get exam questions on the 5 ways. You should just know that. Then we're going to be able to evaluate the logic of the 5 ways and say what we think about them. All right. So I'm just going to pause now, and what I would like you to do is to actually write these down in your workbook, okay? And I would love it if you could score yourself on them, and I'm going to walk around and check to see if you've scored yourself. So remember, an APK is designed to get your brain thinking about knowledge that you can attach new stuff to. So I just mentioned that the cosmology in our modern day way of thinking is a branch of physics that explains how the universe has been created. I would like you, for your APK, to draw me a picture of the universe being created. Any way that you think it was created. If you want to draw the Big Bang, go for it. If you want to draw anything, go for it. But just draw a picture that represents how you believe the universe was actually created. Okay. Now that you've done your APK, we need to get right into some new content. So the first thing I need to talk to you about is, what is cosmology? Now, I've tried to teach you guys about etymology before. In fact, let's just briefly do this. Let's have a look at what Google says is etymological, okay? So let's have a look at, I'll type in cosmology meaning. Should give me some. No, it decides to just give me the definition. Here we go. And we get the actual origin or the etymology of it as well. So now we're saying it's the science of the origin or development of the universe. That's how we think about it. But in the past, we need to remember that cosmology was the philosophy about how the world was created, and a lot of times religious narratives were used to explain it. So we can see that the ancient Greeks had this term cosmos, which meant order, right? The way the world was ordered, or the way the world was structured, right? But basically meant order or world, all right? And logia meant discourse, but logia then evolved into meaning logic, because discourse or language allows us to express logic. So logo, logos, sorry, and logia. All these things come together in order to allow us to understand that basically the word logic is highly tied to the ancient Greek word for word and language. Okay, put them together and we get the cosmologia, right? Or in French, that would derived into cosmologie. Cosmologia, can you hear it evolving and changing? And around about the mid 17th century, we started calling it cosmology, and it literally means the study of the world or the order. And if you think about it, if it means study of the order of the world, it would mean also the study of how the world was created and how that order of the world was created or began. So then the word cosmology began to be a discussion about the origin of the universe, okay? But primarily from a religious point of view. St. Thomas Aquinas existed from 1225 to 1274. He would have said that he was engaging in cosmology as he articulated these philosophical arguments. And he's using the origin of the universe principles or the way that the world works kind of principles to explain and prove the existence of God. So I'm just going to give you some time now to stop and record your understanding of what the cosmos is and to use some pictures to represent your understanding. Okay? So here is St. Thomas Aquinas. This is the old guy right here, very well-known Catholic philosopher. And he sat down in a chair one day and he said, I need to prove that God exists. Anyone who doesn't agree with me is basically crazy. And he wants to basically develop 5 cosmological proofs. And by cosmology, we need to move away from origin of the universe stuff now. And maybe we can really look at it in its traditional Greek form. Yes, it is about origin of the universe stuff, and we can probably see that as we go through the arguments, but it's also about the way the world works, all right, the world order works, and how that was put into place. So he developed these different things, these 5 ways or 5 points of discussion for looking at them. And the first way is what we call the argument from motion. And basically, he looks at how motion came to be in the universe and postulates that someone needed to be there to create the motion. All right. And that's why, if you have a look at this picture here, I've got a man getting punched in the face in slow motion because I just thought it would easily keep you remembering and understanding what it is when we talk about motion. Motion is movement in time. There we go. There's a man moving in time. That looks really painful. That looks really painful. Ouch. Who on earth would volunteer to have that done to them? But all these faces are moving in time. It's slow motion, right? The second way is what we call the argument from an official cause, from an efficient cause. And the efficient cause is pretty much what is the first cause, you know? And that's why I put the Big Bang here. You know, how did something arrive from nothing? And you can watch this video because the Big Bang is kind of a modern scientific explanation that uses a lot of the argument of the efficient cause, yeah? So how did everything just pop into existence? Have a look at it. It's a good way to kind of conceptualize or think about what an efficient cause would be. Did God create the Big Bang, for instance? The third way is moving from possibility. It's about possibility and necessity. And the reason why I've put a picture of the TARDIS fading away and fading in and out of being is because this way is very much concerned with things existing in time, but only for a set amount of time, and then before and after they exist. So when they come in and out of being, they don't exist. So there has to be a particular period in time where nothing existed at all, and someone or something had to create that existence, right? This is probably the argument that is the most deductive out of all of them, okay? The next thing is what we call the gradations of being. When we look at the gradations of being, and we'll explore it a bit more, what we're effectively doing is we're tracking, as you can see, different levels of being. And that's why when we talk about gradations, we are talking about a scale, a gradual scale. So here we've got a gradation of yellow, a gradation of green. It starts off dark and it moves to the bright. And what he says is somehow my existence or my gradations of my existence or gradations of existence of other beings or other creatures in general can help me prove the existence of God. And the last one is pretty easy to get. It's called the argument from design. Ergo, I'm sorry, it therefore follows that if the universe was, as the universe is made to function in a particular way, that is evidence of design and evidence of a divine creator, okay? All right, what I would like you to do, pretty pleased with the cherry on top, is to write down the 5 ways and briefly record an understanding of what you think they are. It doesn't matter if you're accurate or not accurate. The point is, I just need you to briefly record what you think they are, and possibly, you must include some kind of non-linguistic representation of an example, like I have here as well, okay? All right, cheers. Okay, now I don't care what anyone says, the web is not a tool of evil. It can actually be an amazing resource for developing our understanding of concepts and things, particularly when you do a cross-reference and you find that what one really good source says is repeated across like 20 other websites, and those websites have a reasonably good reputation. And I managed to go to one website, I can't remember the actual thing, but I had a look at this really simple outline of all the different ways, and I thought, well, that's accurate, especially when I did reading on other websites. I thought, oh, actually, that matches pretty much what I've always thought are the different ways, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the premises and then trace how we come to a final conclusion. And then I'm going to read through the text and talk about, well, what is he thinking? And we'll map it out as we do so on our little mind map here, okay? So let's remember, you must get into the habit of writing notes when you think something is important, not just when I tell you to take notes. That is so, so, so important. You must also get into the habit of using color, a non-linguistic representation to write down key points, okay? So let's look at the first way argument. The first way is the argument from motion, and here's a basic summary of how it works using a standard form argument. Our senses prove that some things are in motion. We can see things move. Things move when potential motion becomes actual motion. A rock has the potential to move. A billiard ball has the potential to move. When we actually see that converted into real motion, that's when it is motion. So when the billiard ball starts moving, that's actual motion, not potential motion. But the billiard ball always has the potential to move. Only actual motion can convert any potential motion into an actual motion. That's absolutely correct. Let's have a look at our man getting punched in the face. Here we go. Now if we watch this, we'll notice that the man's face is still before it gets punched. The man's face has potential motion. But once the moving boxing glove actually hits his face then moves. So potential motion, which is something that is still but can move, is converted into motion when something that's actually moving touches it or has contact with it. See? Not moving. It's not really a good example. It's a slow motion. Let's go back to the punching in the face. Not moving face moves when punched. The thing that converted the potential into actual was already moving, so it was actual motion. All right? So only actual motion can convert a potential motion into an actual motion. Nothing can at once both be actuality and potentiality. So you can't have something that is moving or not moving at the same time. All right? Therefore, nothing can actually move itself. So nothing can actually be moving, have potentiality and actuality at the very same point in time. So therefore, nothing can actually move itself. Something else has to convert potential motion into motion. Therefore, each emotion is moved by something else. Agreed, like we saw the boxing glove punching the face. And the sequence of motion cannot extend ad infinitum. This term means forever. Therefore, it is necessary to arrive at a first mover, putting things in motion in the very first instance, and that must be a god. The god was the first mover, the person who created the first actual motion, which you could say is the Big Bang. You know, you could say was the very beginning of time when the first thing moved. All right. So let's have a quick read and we'll map out what the man says, okay? All right. The existence of God could be shown in 5 ways. The first and clearest is taken from the idea of motion. Now, it is certain that in our senses corroborate it, that some things in the world are in motion. Uh-oh, got to go to Mrs. Google and say, let's type in an image for the senses. Images, I want all the senses. I'm going to put you over here, and I'm going to say the first thing is that our senses prove to us that things exist in motion. Motion. Oh yeah, actually, I like the billiard ball example, so you know, we all know when the white cue hits that other ball, it's going to make it move, but for the moment, it's still. So we're going to just map things out this way. All right, what you need to do right now is you need to stop. You need to make notes. Okay, so you should have something that says our senses confirm that motion actually exists. And I will put a little trigger word here so we know what we're talking about. Confirm. All right, put it there and we'll do a link so we know that we're actually coming up with the argument that the senses provide that confirmation. Awesome. Okay, going back to the reading. Where are you, Mr. Reading? Okay. But everything is in motion is moved by something else. Easy, right? For nothing is in motion except in so far as it is potentiality in relation to that towards it is in motion. So what he's saying is we've got things that exist in potential motion, which means they're... I hate these bloody self-motivational memes. They are so wanky. So let's have a rock. We all know that the rock, which is lying still, is not going to move. This is still, right? So we know that things, but even though it's still, we could conceivably imagine a big asteroid coming from outer space and crashing right into it. So this has potential motion. Okay? Bang. Bang. But of course, a rock can't be moved unless something else that is moving acts upon it. So let's do this. Throwing a rock. And here we have... Oh, that's cruel. Let's throw a rock at a cat, shall we? It's just fun. Here we've got a being that decides to put the rock in motion, and the being that actually put it in motion was already moving beforehand. Alright, and that's exactly what he's saying. Nothing can move unless something that moves acts upon it. We move from potentiality, something that has the capacity or the potential to move, to actual motion, when something that is actually moving acts upon it. Alright. And then we go back to the reading. Now, a thing that causes movement insofar as it is in actuality. So, to cause movement is nothing else than to bring something from potentiality into actuality. We've represented that here. The chimpanzee has picked up the rock and thrown it. It's converted its potential movement, or it's the fact that it could move, into actual movement. And that was done by the chimpanzee's actual movement, right? But a thing cannot be brought from potentiality to actuality except by something which exists in actuality. In other words, for example, that which is hot in actuality, like fire makes wood, which is only hot in potentiality, to be hot in actuality, and thereby causes movement in it and alters it, which is true, right? Let's go here. If we have a fire, the same kind of example. Let's just say we have wood. Let's say we've got a collection of wood here, right? And then we also have, and we know that the wood isn't burning, right? So it has the potential to burn, but the wood is not actually burning. And when we set the wood on fire, we need something that is actually on fire beforehand to burn it. Right, so actuality converts potentiality into actuality. Okay? And that's what he's saying. So, I mean, so far everything's making sense, and you guys should be taking notes when you get the chance to. Make sure when you take notes you're doing it with lots of visual representations of key concepts, okay? Alright, so we go back to the reading, and he says, but it's not possible that the same thing should be at the same time in actuality and potentiality. Can you have wood burning and not burning at the same time? Probably not. But only in relation to different things. For what is hot in actuality cannot at the same time be hot in potentiality, though it is the same time at the same time cold in potentiality. So it can have more than one potential state. That's absolutely fine. Water can be steam or it can be snow. That makes it. It is impossible, therefore, that in relation to the same thing and in the same way, anything should both cause movement and be caused. So what we're saying is quite clearly, and we'll go back to the wood example, it cannot be actually I'll say not equal to cause and not cause. Your thing can't. Actually, let's make this even more clear for you. Potential motion can't cause itself. Okay? So we know that the wood can't catch on fire unless someone puts it on fire. And of course, who is the one that was the first mover? If you said God, you'd be correct. If therefore the thing which causes it to move be in motion, this too must be moved by something else. And we have like a domino effect. We can understand that the universe, according to our main man, is like dominoes. Alright, so just put in falling dominoes. Alright, and what we can say is that obviously the dominoes themselves need another domino in order to be moved. And they in turn need another domino, and they in turn need another domino. And there ultimately has to be someone who moved the first domino. Who moved the first domino? If you said God, you would be correct. That's God. There you go. He has to be the man who moved the first domino. Okay? So let's see if we're correct, right? And it goes on for, but we cannot proceed for infinity in this way. Something has to be the first cause, because in what case would there be no first mover? And in consequence, neither would there be any other mover, for secondary movers do not cause movement except by being moved by a first mover. As, for example, a stick cannot cause movement unless it is moved by the hand. Therefore, it is necessary to stop at some first mover, which is moved by nothing else. And this is what we understand to be God. So God created the very first movement, or God tipped down the first domino and made all the other dominoes fall afterwards. Now, the problem with this argument is only basically one argument is that it denies the circularity of time. It assumes time is linear. Okay? It, and we don't have any proof for whether or not it is or isn't. Okay? But it assumes time is linear when could it be circular? In other words, could the last fall of the domino make the first domino fall, and you've got this perpetual motion of dominoes falling down as time unfolds. So I'll put a question mark here to say this argument assumes that time is linear. Alright, what I need you to do is to spend a lot of time going through this diagram and taking all the notes that you can with visual representations, okay? Alright, so with the second way where we talk about the efficient cause, what we're effectively doing is we are looking at the motion argument, but in a more abstract way. So obviously anything in actual motion, once it hits or comes in contact with anything that has potential motion, will turn the potential motion into actual motion. But that is just an example of what we would call one thing causing another. All right, potential. Actual motion causes potential motion. All right, so let's move to a more abstract way about thinking of this. And this is what we do with the second way of the argument, okay? The second way argument, which is called the argument from efficient causes. So we perceive a series of efficient causes of things in the world. We always do. We always think that one thing makes another thing happen, but nothing would ever exist prior to itself. Therefore, nothing in the world of things we perceive is the efficient cause of itself. Just like a potential thing can't will itself into motion, something needs to act upon it, we can easily say there needs to be an efficient cause. There needs to be something that makes something happen beforehand. Now, if a previous efficient cause does not exist, neither does the thing that it results in. So if I don't have a electric spark to ignite some fuel, the fuel won't turn into a fire, right? I need the cause. If I don't say Arbor is an absolute legend, we should all have lots of cake, then nobody would laugh. You needed me to say that because that in turn caused that to behave, and of course the consequent thing wouldn't have happened if it didn't. Therefore, if the first thing is in a series does not exist, nothing in the series will happen. So you need the first thing in a series of causes. I come into the classroom, I ask everybody to sit down, I crack a joke, everybody laughs. There's a series of causes which started with me coming into the classroom. If the series of efficient causes extends ad infinitum into the past, for then there would be nothing existing now. Oh, that's very confusing. All right. Let's think about it, right? Do you know why that's the case? If everything went on in infinitely, there would be no cause to create the next cause, to create the next cause, to create the next cause. Nothing would happen to set things into motion. Nothing would happen to make time happen. All right? That's a complicated concept. So just understand that if we went on for infinity, nothing would exist to create the first instance of, or to create the first result of a series of cause and effect. So can you just write that down and make sure you got your thinking correct? Okay, so you're saying this is plainly false. It's absolutely false to suggest that the causes went on forever into the past, because then nothing would actually be caused, because you always need a causer and the first causer. So saying that is plainly false. There are things existing now that came about through efficient causes. So therefore efficient causes do not extend ad infinitum into the past. Therefore it's necessary to admit that the first efficient cause of everything, which gives everything its existence, is God. Alright, so this isn't just about notion, this is about all things that exist, or all things that are the result of cause and effect relationships. So it could be about psychology, it could be about heating something up, it could be about physical forces, or it could be about setting a billiard ball into motion. Basically it says that there's a series of causes in the world, and we need to make sure that these causes have a first cause, otherwise nothing would put the chain of causes into place. Take a note. All right, so let's do the reading of this particular argument. All right, the second way, the argument from efficient causation. The second way is taken from the idea of efficient cause. One, we find there is among material things a regular order of efficient causes. One thing causes another. Again, we go back to Mr. Dominoes, so let's copy him, because we can see what he means by the nature of the efficient cause. The first thing, the first domino to fall, or the first thing to push the domino in the falling direction. Yeah? All right. So something had to be it, and it's probably this man here. Yeah. So continuing on, but we do not find, nor indeed is it possible, that anything is the efficient cause of itself. We would agree. So a billiard ball can't make itself move. The domino can't make itself move unless someone makes it move. For in that case, it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. So, in other words, you have to go back in time and make yourself move in order to move yourself, and he's saying that's not possible. All right. For if we arrange in order all efficient causes, the first is the cause of the intermediate, and the intermediate is the cause of the last, whether the intermediate may be many or only one. Let's have a look at what he means by that using the domino example. Look, here is a domino that fell. This domino fell, and that made that domino fall. This is the intermediate domino. It wasn't the first cause, but it was definitely the thing that caused this domino to fall. So really, all causes, if you think about it, have to be the intermediate cause. Something pushed this over, that made it the second cause, which made it the intermediate cause that moved that over, and so forth. Take a note, okay? Right, so if we get the concept of intermediate causes, we kind of understand that, there needs to be a first cause, because nothing can move outside of itself and make things happen. So this domino pushing that domino over is actually an example of an intermediate cause, because other things happened in order to cause that to happen. Okay? There we go. And then he goes, now it is not possible to proceed in infinity and inefficient causes. You can't go forever, because there needs to be something that actually made the first thing happen. For if we arrange in order all efficient causes, the first is the cause of the intermediate, and the intermediate the cause of the last, whether the intermediate be many or only one. But if we remove a cause, the effect is removed. In other words, if you take away a cause, you don't actually get the result. Therefore, if there is no first among efficient causes, neither will there be a last or an intermediate. So he's saying something has to happen first. The first domino has to be flipped over in order for the last one to be flipped over in a domino chain. But if we proceed to infinity in efficient causes, there will be no first efficient cause, and thus there will be no ultimate effect. So you can't have an effect without the cause making the effect, nor any intermediate causes which lead to the final effect. Therefore, it is necessary to suppose the existence of some first efficient cause, and this men all call God. Alright, so God is the first cause. Alright, God is the one who put into place all the other cause and effect relationships. And that's what the argument of the efficient cause is. Now, it's very similar to the argument of potentiality and motion, potential and actual motion. The only thing is, potential and action motion would be like a subset of efficient causes. An efficient cause is more of an abstract explanation of how things happen. Okay? Take some notes. Okay, so the next argument moves a bit away from that. What it does is it tries to talk about time and the nature of our existence in time, and pointing out again that throughout time something needs to put things in place, which is similar but not exactly a copy of the argument of efficient causes. Let's quickly go over it. We find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, that come into being and go out of being. You live, you die, and you only live for a certain amount of time. This means that everything that exists is contingent, which means it comes in and out of being based on cause and effect, but also unpredictable ways, okay? For each contingent being, there is a time that it does not exist. That's before and after it comes in and out of being, right? Therefore, it is impossible for these to always exist over time. Okay, so we can't exist all the time because there is a time that it does not exist. All right. Therefore, there could have been a time when no things existed, which makes absolute sense. There could have been a time when, if you think about it, if everything that exists in the material world is temporary, comes in and out of being all the time, it's possible to conceive that all things may not have existed in one period of time. Okay? Take some notes. All right. So therefore, at the time, there would have been nothing to bring the currently existing contingent beings into existence. What does this word contingent mean? It's probably confusing a lot of people. Well, let's go back to all, and we'll have a look at what Google says, because we love Google, don't we? The new big brother. All right, contingent. Contingent means subject to chance. It means occurring or existing only if certain circumstances are provided, and that's what we're using contingent in that context. We're saying everything is contingent or relying on chance, but basically things come into being based on the right circumstances. And if you're very smart right now, you're saying, oh, circumstances. The circumstances could be causes, and then the beings that come into existence because of the circumstances are effects. This relates to the argument of the efficient cause, and you'd be 100% correct, right? So therefore, there has to be, therefore, at the time, there would have been nothing to bring the currently existing contingent beings into existence. So, because everything depends on the right circumstances coming together in order to produce something, we've got a bit of an issue because obviously those circumstances weren't there when there was nothing. Therefore, if that was the case, nothing would exist now. So, this is what's really clever about this argument. Let's go into some logic, and I'll stop in 1 minute. If everything in time that exists is dependent on the circumstances that create it, i.e. a cause and effect relationship, and it's pretty easy to assume that everything that exists in the universe is temporal, so it comes in and out of being through time. There has to be a period at which nothing existed. But the paradox is, and the contradiction is, that if nothing existed, then the circumstances could never have emerged to make the other circumstances come into being in the first place. Okay, which is absurd, because so how can contingent beings, which we know exist, we sense they exist, come into being if the circumstances weren't there in the first place, or the circumstances weren't there to create the circumstances? Therefore, not every being is contingent. There has to be something that didn't come into being in order to, what's the word I'm looking for? There had to be something that didn't rely on circumstances in order to come into being. All right. Therefore, some being exists of its own necessity. It just exists logically, like a round circle. It's logically necessary that it's round, and maybe God is the same kind of being, right? So let's read and map out, shall we? This one's a bit of a long ending. No, it's not. That's good. The third way rests on the idea of the contingent, which means coming to being based on the right circumstances. So we need to put in here a picture of circumstance, just so we know that that's what we are thinking about. I hate these winky things. Yeah, let's put the rock climbing in. The reason why I'm putting the rock climbing is because basically if I fall, well, there are the circumstances we know that were in place to facilitate that falling, i.e. I was climbing a rock wall and gravity was acting upon me. All right? So it's based on circumstances, but I'm also going to put a circle in here because it's also based on necessity. And we all know that it's impossible to conceive of a circle that has straight edges. All right? I actually want a circle. So here's my man, the circle. And we also know that that's basically what we're looking at. I'm going to put some trigger words in. Okay, there we go. And we will basically say there's a relationship between the two. We'll put that up later. What does he got to say? So he says that this argument is based on the concept of necessity, which is basically things being logical in a deductive way, i.e. circles have no straight edges. Contingent meaning that things arrive out of circumstance. Now we find that there are certain things in the universe which are capable of existing and not existing. Yep, they come into being and out of being, just like our man, the TARDIS. Here he is. So, capable of existing and not existing. For we find that some things are brought into existence and then destroyed, and consequently are capable of not being or being. But it's impossible for all things which exist to be of this kind, because anything which is capable of not existing at some time or other does not exist. So what we're saying is that of our beings that come into existence, i.e. Mr. TARDIS, we all know, anyone who is a Doctor Who fan knows that he travels across time and everything like that, but we're just going to put the TARDIS because the TARDIS can kind of appear out of nowhere. Alright, so put Mr. TARDIS in here, your Doctor Who fans, and he comes in and out of being at weird points in the timeline. But even we have to conceive that there was a point where the TARDIS didn't exist. Maybe in the TARDIS's own timeline. Yeah. So the TARDIS comes in and out of being, but even it had to have a time where it didn't. It's just not being. No, sorry. Don't exist. Yeah. And what's going on here is that, well, this is pretty much all contingent beings. Okay. So he's saying, what does he say? I'm trying to get here. Because anything that does not exist cannot. Yeah. If therefore all things are capable of not existing, there was a time when nothing existed. Yep. So there has to be a time when, if things came in and out of being through the timeline because they are contingent upon the circumstances that create them, we get complete blackness. We get absolute nothingness. We get the void. The void. Here it is. Right. So there has to be a time when nothing existed. And that means, right, that if every being was contingent, then nothing could come into being. So there had to be one non-contingent being that could trigger everything on. So, okay, so if therefore all things are capable of not existing, there was a time when nothing existed in the universe. We had the void. But if this were true, there would be also nothing in existence now, because anything that does not exist cannot begin to exist except by the agency of something which has existence, i.e., it's the first efficient cause, or it's the thing of actual motion, putting something into motion. Right? If therefore there was one nothing which existed, it would have been impossible for anything to begin to exist, so nothing would exist now. So we'd have a double void, right? If there was a nothing at the start, and everything that existed was contingent, so it was reliant upon the circumstances that created it, then we'd have a nothing now. We'd have another void, but we don't. We actually have the world. It exists. So let's put that here. We have the Earth. We exist. Here it is. We know that it's real. So there's the void. But the problem is we can actually see there are a lot of contingent beings that exist, and the Earth is a contingent being. So where do we go from here? This is clearly false. Something had to exist. Therefore, all things that are not contingent, and therefore, all things are not contingent. Not everything is a being that needs to rely on circumstances to be created. All right. And again, if you want a mathematical proof of that, think about a circle. All right. It, as a concept, exists in logical necessity, and it doesn't need circumstances to trigger the concept to exist. Okay. Contingent must be something which is necessary in the universe, but everything which is necessary either has or has not the cause of its necessity from its outside source. So anything that exists either has not the cause of its necessity from an outside source. Has not. God, I hate double negatives. But everything which is necessary either has or has not the cause of its necessity from an outside source. Okay, let's just leave that. Now, it is not possible to proceed to infinity in necessary things which have a cause of their necessity, as have been proved in the cases of the efficiency. I really think what he's saying here, if I can highlight it, is that not everything which is necessary either has or has not the cause of its necessity from an outside source. So in other words, Mr. Circle here he is. Hello, Mr. Circle. He doesn't need anything external to trigger its existence. We know it exists as an idea. We do need the material form of it to be triggered by the right circumstances, but the concept of a circle will always exist without an external cause. Okay? And that's all he's saying. I think you can see that he's going to say God would be the same. Alright? Unlike everything else. So anything that has an efficient cause would be a thing that relies on contingency in order for it to manifest. Therefore, it is necessary to suppose the existence of something which is necessary in itself only, not having the cause of its necessity from an outside source, like the circle, but which is a cause of necessity in others. So basically, God put in motion the necessity of logic and everything else, which is basically what we're talking about. Alright, so our man here is actually saying the necessary logic of the circle was created by God because he believes that the circle's necessity or necessary logic was generated from an external source. I don't agree with that. But what he ultimately says is that this man here, you guessed it, Mr. God, Monty Python, right? He basically was the first being that had the external cause both within itself. It didn't need an external logic or necessity outside of anything else. It basically triggered off all the other contingencies that created all the other things that also set into place the logic and the way of thinking that in turn allowed a circle to exist as a necessary object. Okay? And what I said was really deep and complex, so take some notes. Alright, so this next argument is kind of very, very similar to the argument presented by St. Anselm, which is the ontological proof, but it's not, it in no way functions ontologically. This one is a purely relative concept, so we're not looking at whether or not this argument has nothing to do at all with the idea that if perfection exists as an idea, perfection implies existence. That is not in this argument at all. I'll say it again. That is not in this argument at all. That is not in this argument at all. This argument here is more related to the concept that Arthur C. Clarke had, that if an alien organization came to visit us with technology we couldn't understand, we perceive it as magic and them as gods. All right? So it's called the gradation argument. And gradation means, again, things exist on a scale, right? So there is a gradation to be found in things. Some are better or worse than others. Predications, which basically mean statements about degree or things that have degree, require reference to the highest example of it. So for instance, if I say who is the most super awesome teacher in the world, we'd say Mr. Ross. And therefore, if we'd have a lesser teacher and we were comparing them to Mr. Ross, we'd be able to talk about their degree of teaching quality. But we have to compare it to the utmost ideal, all right? Let's give this other example. A thing is said to be hotter according to as it is nearly represents that which is hottest. So we can only say something is hotter as it tries to approach the absolute perfect hot thing, yeah? The maximum in any genus, so the maximum in any scale that we're looking at is the cause of all in that genus. I don't know if I agree with that, but that's what he's claiming. Therefore, there must be something which is is to all beings the cause of their being, goodness, and every other kind of perfection, and we call this God. So I guess one way to really sum this argument up is that if there are degrees of perfection, there has to be the perfect perfect. That perfect is God, and it sets in place all these other things. All right. So let's look at what he says. The fourth way, the argument from degrees of excellence, or the gradation argument. All right, the fourth way is taken from degrees which are to be found in things. That's why I put up here some scales. And number one, for among things we find, there is more or less good or true or noble. And likewise, there is a case of other things of this kind. Right, so we can find good or true noble qualities in people, but we can also find complete assholes. Number two, but the words more or less are used in different things in proportion as they approximate in their different ways to something which has the particular quality of the highest degree. I.e., we call a thing hotter when it approximates more nearly to that which is hot in the highest degree. So the highest version of hot. Let's have a look. Let's go the temperature. Let's type in temperature. All right. And look, let's use the very first thing that came up to give us a good little visual example, okay? When we're talking about degrees and gradations. All right. So I'll put it on this side so it's easy to see. All right, degrees and gradations. Bang. So we know, let's imagine that the very top of this is the absolute most hot thing that could ever be achieved, right? And we can see that this is cold because relative to the hottest thing ever, it's lower when compared to this. So this is approaching or getting closer to the hottest thing ever when compared to the cold. And so we have degrees of things. And what it says is that the cause of making this become hot is the absolute pinnacle, the absolute top. Now, if we think about this in terms of perfection, all right. Oh, I hate these winky bloody motivational speeches. Let's perfect cake. Let's do the perfect cake because I like cake. There's a perfect cake. There we go. Oh yeah. We'll look at the perfect cake. And what we know is that we'd use that as a benchmark for basically measuring all other degrees of perfect cakeness, right? And the same goes for perfection in and of itself. And of course, which is the being that allows us to approach and measure our degree of perfection? You guess it, it's this man here. It is God. I copied you. There he is. And let's see if we... Alright, so... There is therefore something in which is true in the highest degree, good in the highest degree, and noble in the highest degree. And consequently, there must also be something which has being in the highest degree. So its actual existence is in the highest form of existence. For things which are true in the highest degree also have being in the highest degree. But anything which has a certain quality of any kind in the highest degree is also the cause of all those things, as, for example, fire, which is hot in the highest degree, is the cause of all hot things. And in this case, he's kind of talking about fire as in like the pure absolute concept of fire, right? Fire causes other examples of fire, but fireness is really what he's talking about, alright? Therefore, there exists something which is the cause of all being and goodness, just like fireness and the very concept of fire, or the potentiality of absolute fire in the universe, would bring into being all other fires. And you can't have a fire without a fire, right? There exists something which in the cause of being is all goodness and every perfection, blah blah blah. So we get it, alright? That's this main man here. Okay, I'd like you to take some notes, please. Now we covered the very last one, which is similar to an argument we're going to explore in next class, which is called the teleological argument. Basically, it's called the fifth way. It's an argument from design, and we see that the natural bodies work towards some goal, and not only do so by chance. Most natural things lack knowledge, so how can they move towards the goal? Do you get what I mean? A rock doesn't have knowledge, but it might move to the divine purpose of what has been set in place. So as an arrow reaches its target, it's directed by an archer. The arrow doesn't have intelligence, but there is obviously an intelligent being that has employed the arrow on its path to achieve the target. What lacks intelligence achieves goals by being directed by something that is intelligent, i.e. there's the purpose of design in the universe, alright? So let's go to see what he said. The fifth way, argument from harmony. By harmony, what he really means is that there's a divine order in the universe. The fifth way is taken from the way in which nature is governed, for we observe for certain things which lack knowledge, such as natural bodies, work towards an end, i.e. they have effect, they try to achieve something. This is obvious because they always, or at any rate, are frequently operate in the same way so as to attain the best possible result, or most likely the most predictable result. We know that the laws of relativity are great ways of predicting the macro movements of extremely large objects in the universe, right? We know that. They behave almost as if there's some kind of divine providence there, right? And so it's almost like they're behaving according to a goal, a way that's been governed by them. But we can't argue that, like, a huge asteroid that crashed into the Earth and destroyed all the dinosaurs, which was basically using the laws of motion and relativity to function, we can't actually argue that those rules were that the asteroid was intelligent. We can't argue that, right? So in a sense that it is like a arrow hitting a target. Yeah. Yep, that's exactly what it's like. It's trying to hit its target right like that. And if that's the way the asteroid is behaving, then perhaps there is some kind of evidence of divine intelligence, because it doesn't have the intelligence to direct itself in that predictable way. Hence it is clear that they do not arrive at their goal by chance, but by purpose. But those things which have no knowledge do not move towards the goal unless they are guided by something or someone, i.e. that is God. Okay, so just again like the arrow example, the arrow didn't steer itself to the target. It was put in motion by an intelligent archer that made that happen. Now, basically, though we're not capable of knowing God's true purpose, we can see evidence of his purpose in the predictability of objects based on the laws of motion. I mean, there's just evidence and things that make it look like the universe is functioning appropriately. So something must have put this stuff in motion in the first place. Okay? That's what he's arguing. So now that I want you to just basically finish taking notes, I want you to make sure that every main concept has a non-linguistic representation. And then I want you to go ahead, and this is going to be cruel, but it needs to be done, and I will be checking up on it. I want you to look at questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 of page 230. All right, let's put it up here. Answer questions on page 230 about basically the cosmological argument. Sorry about the noise, I got some grumpy year 8s mucking up for a teacher next door, so being a bit cheeky. Alright, so there's a cosmological argument, and they are questions 1 to 5. And I want to check and see if you get them done, okay? So make sure you do them. All's good. Have a lovely day. I hope you enjoyed this interactive lecture. Thank you.